When President Barack Obama released his budget proposal for NASA in February, Florida's Space Coast was left with a festering cloud of uncertainty. After a visit by Obama on April 15th to Kennedy Space Center, that haze started to clear. I'm Matt Reed of Florida Today. The report you're about to see is part of our continuing coverage of the shutdown of the Space Shuttle program and the transition to what is to come. During the president's visit, Mr. Obama set long-term goals of visiting asteroids and Mars, but left the Space Coast's immediate future in doubt. Mr. Obama has no plans to extend the shuttle program past its scheduled November retirement, and he still plans on canceling the Constellation moon program.
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic about what President Obama has told us. It looks like we have some opportunities that Florida could grasp a hold of, especially with some of the new technologies. The robotics, the propulsions, habitats, those are all opportunities for us here in Florida. But as I said, cautious because it's a question of how long it'll take for the jobs to actually come through.
I like some of the things that the president is proposing. What I'm concerned about is the time frame in which he proposes to do them. For example, the president is shutting down the shuttle program, or going along with the shutdown of the space shuttles, but he also canceled Project Constellation, and he's going to rely on private companies to ferry astronauts to space. Well, I think that the shuttles do need to be retired. They're getting old. My personal opinion is that we should continue to fly the shuttles until we have a replacement. The president shut down Constellation. Well, Constellation was our replacement for the space shuttles. So now we find ourselves in a situation where we're shutting down our only access to space and we have no replacement. The idea of using private rockets to take astronauts into space is a great idea, except the private companies are not ready to do this yet. There's no private company out there that has developed a rocket that can safely take humans to and from Earth orbit. And it's going to take years for them to develop that capability. So I'm concerned about the time frame. I think we're going to give up our only access to space, and when we do that, we Americans will lose our leadership role in space. So I'm very much concerned about it from a scientific and exploration standpoint, and of course concerned about it from a job standpoint.
An estimated 7,000 to 9,000 aerospace workers face losing their jobs following the retirement of the space shuttle fleet and with the cancellation of the Constellation program, a fact not missed by the president.
I want to say a few words about jobs. Suzanne pointed out to me that the last time I was here, I made a very clear promise that I would help in the transition into a new program to make sure that people who are already going through a tough time here in this region were helped. By continuing to support NASA funding, by speeding the development of the shuttle successor, by making sure that all those who work in the space industry in Florida do not lose their jobs when the shuttle is retired, because we can't afford to lose their expertise. And despite some reports to the contrary, my plan will add more than 2,500 jobs along the Space Coast in the next 2 years compared to the plan under the previous administration. So I want to make that point. We're going to modernize the Kennedy Space Center, creating jobs as we upgrade launch facilities. And there's potential for even more jobs as companies in Florida and across America compete to be part of a new space transportation industry. And some of those industry leaders are here today. And this holds the promise of generating more than 10,000 jobs nationwide over the next few years. And many of these jobs will be created right here in Florida because this is an area primed to lead in this competition.
Anytime we talk about the jobs, the big number we looked at was that 9,000 jobs that the shuttle was losing when they canceled that program and the Constellation program. With the additional 2,500 jobs, and if they add the 1,700, it's still 3,500, 4,000 jobs. The question we come into is, well, now you're back to almost that original gap you had from the shuttle shutting down before. So while it sounds great for me, it's still the same type of gap that we have, and what are we going to do to close that gap?
The job issue, which is critical here, both in Brevard County and in Central Florida because of its economic implications, he had said that under his plan, there will be in the next 2 years here anywhere between 4,500 to 5,500 jobs created, which would alleviate about 60% of the job losses from the shuttle shutdown. He says that's going to be about 2,500 jobs more than if the Bush administration's plan had been continued under Constellation. Now, a lot of folks are wondering where are those numbers coming from and how solid and how real they are, and I think that's what everyone wants to wait and see.
Well, I can tell you that with keeping Orion, that's about 500 jobs at the beginning. It ramps up to 1,000 over about a year to 18-month time frame. So there you have 1,000 jobs. The other 1,500 jobs in that 2,500 that he talked about, I believe that he's talking about those immediately coming with some of the construction areas. However, most of the aerospace workers are not going to want to transition over to those construction jobs. They're not qualified for those. So that's a different kind of worker going into that, and that still leaves your aerospace worker without a job. The rest of the jobs, it's really not here today. It's down the line. It's probably 2 to 3 years. And that's what concerns me the most. If the jobs are not here within the next year, we will not have this workforce available. They will have made a decision to do something else, to go somewhere else.
These engineers are for launching. They're not here necessarily to do the robotics. They're not here to do the climate. They're not here for that part. They're here for the launch sequence. So if we don't launch until, okay, let's be optimistic, to 2015, it's still 2010, that's 4 years away. They're going to go where the jobs are. They're going to have to. They may retrain and do something else, but as far as being able to stay here and stay in space, I don't think they can stay in that job. I think that job and that career will move either to Utah, Nevada, somewhere else where the commercial, and I want to do commercial. We want commercial more than anything, but we want to merge NASA with commercial.
While more jobs will be lost than are created, President Obama still has increased the amount of money NASA will receive over the next 5 years, while also laying out a long-term vision for human spaceflight, among other goals.
We start by increasing NASA's budget by $6 billion over the next 5 years. By doing that, we will ramp up robotic exploration of the solar system, including a probe of the sun's atmosphere, new scouting missions to Mars and other destinations, and an advanced telescope to follow Hubble, allowing us to peer deeper into the universe than ever before. We will increase Earth-based observation to improve our understanding of our climate and our world. Science that will garner tangible benefits, helping us to protect our environment for future generations. And we will extend the life of the International Space Station, likely by more than 5 years, while actually using it for its intended purpose, conducting advanced research that can help improve the daily lives of people here on Earth, as well as testing and improving upon our capabilities in space. This includes technologies like more efficient life support systems that will help reduce the cost of future missions. And in order to reach the space station, we will work with a growing array of private companies competing to make getting to space easier and more affordable.
This is a major transformation, and it's a cultural transformation for space workers and for the agency itself. It really kind of gets the agency back to the position it was in the late 50s when it was born. Change is different. Cultural change is even harder. I think it's going to still be difficult for more people to swallow, but I think if these jobs start happening, like they say, it'll help take the edge off, certainly.
While President Obama's plan is a major shift for the future of human spaceflight, the first big change took place 6 years ago when then-President George W. Bush announced the shuttle fleet would be retired and replaced with a new moon program. Known as the Constellation program, a new rocket named Ares was developed with what was considered to be a safer crew capsule named Orion. A successful test flight of the Ares 1X rocket took place in October 2009. However, the program was under much scrutiny for being over budget and behind schedule. Those were the findings of the Augustine Commission, a panel assembled by President Obama to look into the future of manned spaceflight. The panel, led by former Lockheed Martin CEO Norm Augustine, gave the president a detailed report that laid out 3 future options for space, none of which included Constellation. Mr. Obama has incorporated the panel's 3rd option, a flexible path to Mars via an asteroid, while calling for the cancellation of Constellation. He did, however, announce that the Orion crew capsule would continue to be developed and could serve as a rescue vehicle for crews on the International Space Station.
Yes, pursuing this new strategy will require that we revise the old strategy In part, this is because the old strategy, including the Constellation program, was not fulfilling its promise in many ways. That's not just my assessment. That's also the assessment of a panel of respected nonpartisan experts charged with looking at these issues closely. Now, despite this, some have had harsh words for the decisions we've made, including some individuals who I've got enormous respect and admiration for. But what I hope is that everybody will take a look at what we are planning, consider the details of what we've laid out, and see the merits as I've described them. The bottom line is nobody is more committed to manned spaceflight, to human exploration of space, than I am.
I remind everybody that the Constellation program people admitted that they wouldn't get anywhere before the year 2020. So somehow that program veered off course, if I'm in rocketry pun terms. That program missed the mark. You think about now, it was, you said the words, like 6 years ago, the same time the shuttle was canceled, 6 years ago. We started this program, and in 14 years, they didn't predict they'd be able to get to a destination we achieved 40 years ago. So somebody, I guess, finally stepped in to make some changes. So I think, as a Vice President of Planetary Society, I think our members are very supportive of finally getting back on the road to deep space.
I think that the cancellation of Constellation was not the best move to make. In fact, one of the reasons that many people did not protest years ago when the shuttles were scheduled to be shut down was because Constellation was coming right along behind the space shuttles. See, nobody anticipated that. So, again, I, along with many other people, are very concerned about the shutdown of Constellation. Constellation represents our best next option for getting American astronauts into space, yet we're going to shut that down. I've heard the arguments that Constellation was on an unsustainable trajectory. Well, the trajectory is unsustainable because it wasn't funded properly. And the funding required to keep Constellation on track, again, was very, very minimal. I point to another Florida Today study that said that for $15 billion, we could continue to fly the space shuttles and develop Constellation at the same time. Well, we just spent almost $900 billion to bail out companies, many of which should not have been bailed out. It seems to me that we should be able to find 15 to keep America's space program on track.
The president, however, does have a near-term plan to help offset some of the economic losses and retraining needed for displaced workers.
Now, it's true. There are Floridians who will see their work on the shuttle end as the program winds down. This is based on a decision that was made 6 years ago, not 6 months ago. But that doesn't make it any less painful for families and communities affected as this decision becomes reality. So I'm proposing, in part because of strong lobbying by Bill and by Suzanne, as well as Charlie, I'm proposing a $40 million initiative led by a high-level team from the White House, NASA, and other agencies to develop a plan for regional economic growth and job creation. And I expect this plan to reach my desk by August 15th. It's an effort that will help prepare this already skilled workforce for new opportunities in the space industry and beyond.
I don't know if he's going to spend $40 million to develop a plan, or is that $40 million going to be used to invest back in the area in economic development initiatives, whether that be advertising, infrastructure, through grants. We have no idea. Today all we heard was there's $40 million for economic development, and he wants a plan on his desk by August 15th for I think called a regional strategy, and I don't know what his region area is. You know, my region, the region I look at, Central Florida, he may be thinking the Southeast. So we need to know what that's going to be used for. Can that be used for things other than space? Since it is economic development, can we invest that? Are we going to be able to invest this money? How many areas is this money going to? Is it strictly Space Coast or Central Florida or all of Florida? That's going to be the questions we have.
Bringing economic developers, as well as bringing in and keeping jobs not related to the space program, was the aim of a space summit held recently in Melbourne. 2 consultants with experience in working with communities going through economic hardship were brought in to speak to community leaders. Their aim is to help local business and community leaders quickly craft a plan to soften the blow of the layoffs. Mark Nappy, Vice President of the United Space Alliance, discussed how displaced workers will be compensated when they are laid off once the shuttle program ends.
We need some kind of bridge when people are laid off until they find their next job. So we enhanced our severance program, and you get anywhere from 4 to 26 weeks in severance pay based on the experience with the program if you get laid off. There's a second piece to that, which is called a completion bonus. It was put in place to help people, or to try to get people to stay until the end of the shuttle, because we knew we needed those skills. And if they stay, then there's another 15 weeks on top of that that we can give employees, which is on top of the severance, which again is a bridge to help them get to their next job. Or in some cases, people may want to retire.
County Manager Howard Tipton and Superintendent of Brevard Public Schools Brian Bingley expressed their concerns about having less operating revenue as families leave the county and property values decrease.
Certainly we have concerns over the number of possible foreclosures, home abandonments, short sales, and the complicating effect that it has on home prices. A certain percentage of county government, and same is true for the school board, is derived from property taxes. As the values go down, the tax revenues decrease as well. And so certainly have a concern about that, but also making sure that the neighborhoods remain stabilized.
Some of the things that Mr. Tipton identified earlier, the property value drop and loss of tax roll, I mean, those obviously affect our bottom line as we move forward, but then secondarily we have an additional challenge of the declining enrollment that we're talking about. Then brings a drop in revenue, and it really isn't as simple as the mathematical calculation of okay, you've lost this number of students, so you lose this number of teachers and everything's even and we move on, and that's not really the case. In fact, the families and the students who remain expect that all of the programs and opportunities that have been here will still be here. And that's going to be very difficult to promise. But again, going back to the ultimate then issue of looking at our facilities and rezoning, we have a project team already currently examining what will happen as we have to utilize our building capacity in the north and beachside and Merritt Island areas. So the ultimate things that are occurring around the issue at the Kennedy Space Center are really the #1 driver of what we will do as we move forward in some of those budget decisions. Closing schools, is that a possibility? It is a possibility as we look at what real effects in our enrollment take place, because we're going to be charged with using that capacity as efficiently and effectively as we can. So those are things that we are already dealing with, believe it or not, in anticipation of the 11-12 school budget. We just have to think that far ahead with the things that will be affecting both next year and the following year's budget.
Nappy also discussed USA's role in working with other private space firms moving forward after the shuttle's retirement.
You know, we already have contractual relationships with Orbital and SpaceX. So far we've provided just a minimal service to them. We also are working closely with NASA on the 21st Century Launch Complex, providing design support and basically ideas on what the launch complex could look like in the future. Right now, this market is really in its infancy. If you think about where it's got to go with flying humans into space and bringing them back safely, it's really at the beginning. So as this market matures, we're going to get more and more involved. And I would expect that you'll see other companies entering this market as well, which again, we will get involved with. So we've started on it. Again, it's really in its infancy, and as it grows, we're going to be part of it.
President Obama is counting on the growth of lower Earth orbit private space travel as a big part of his plan. Mr. Obama visited with SpaceX President Elon Musk before making his speech and saw the experimental Falcon 9 rocket on the pad.
Now, I recognize that some have said it is unfeasible or unwise to work with the private sector in this way. I disagree. The truth is, NASA has always relied on private industry to help design and build the vehicles that carry astronauts to space. From the Mercury capsule that carried John Glenn into orbit nearly 50 years ago, to the Space Shuttle Discovery currently orbiting overhead. By buying the services of space transportation, rather than the vehicles themselves, we can continue to ensure rigorous safety standards are met, but we will also accelerate the pace of innovations as companies, from young startups to established leaders, compete to design and build and launch new means of carrying people and materials out of our atmosphere.
Well, I think the thing that I was personally disappointed with is the number of jobs that were talked about that were going to be gained, and the fact that the transition, which while I'm all for the privatization, using the private companies to generate jobs, I just don't think that there are going to be enough jobs generated from the so-called manned spaceflight that he's talking about using in the short term. I mean, these are private companies. They want to make a profit. They're going to probably have shareholders that they need to show that, and so they're not going to be hiring the same amount of people that NASA would to launch vehicles.
Another part of the president's plan is the retention of the Orion crew capsule. Its purpose will be different from what it might have been used for with the Constellation program, but it is one area that will at least help stave off some of the job losses.
We will build on the good work already done on the Orion crew capsule. I've directed Charlie Bolden to immediately begin developing a rescue vehicle using this technology, so we are not forced to rely on foreign providers if it becomes necessary to quickly bring our people home from the International Space Station. And this Orion effort will be part of the technological foundation for advanced spacecraft to be used in future deep space missions. In fact, Orion will be ready for flight right here in this room.
The last major point outlined by the president is the one with the most far-reaching and long-term impact: the creation of a heavy-lift rocket that can carry astronauts to asteroids and beyond, eventually leading to Mars.
We will invest more than $3 billion to conduct research on an advanced heavy-lift rocket, a vehicle to efficiently send into orbit the crew capsules, propulsion systems, and large quantities of supplies needed to reach deep space. In developing this new vehicle, we will not only look at revising or modifying older models, we want to look at new designs, new materials, new technologies that will transform not just where we can go, but what we can do when we get there. And we will finalize a rocket design no later than 2015 and then begin to build it. And that's conservative, given that the previous program was behind schedule and over budget.
You know, I mean, 2015 is a date that was in our minds from Constellation originally. You know, we've had a test flight from the Constellation Ares vehicle, and so I think 5 years is an ambitious goal. I would certainly like to see him reach it. He did say that was at the very latest, so it would be interesting to see what might move that date a little bit closer.
Many were hoping to hear the president announce an extension of the shuttle program, but it never happened. The final flight is scheduled to launch in November. Layoffs are expected to begin shortly after the shuttle touches down, 10 days later.
Well, I think a lot of them would have wanted to say, figure out a way to extend the shuttle a little while longer, a few more years. He didn't mention that at all, so clearly as far as the administration is concerned, the shuttle has 3 flights left this year, and that's going to be the end of it. But I think they can take heart in some things. When you look at the amount of money that the administration wants to put in Kennedy Space Center to turn it into this 21st century launch complex, the fact that they're really making the unprecedented move of putting a major manned spaceflight program office at Kennedy for commercial launches and commercial crew, that's very big. And the fact that they want to move the Space Center into world that it has never done before and that many people have said is critical, which is research and development. Through these kinds of things, you create a dynamic, in theory, where you can bring in more companies, more business, even manufacturing, and create more jobs. I think they can take certainly some heart in that. And also the President was very unequivocal about his decision that he thinks by 2030-ish we can be on Mars.
While the President's plan leaves a fair amount of uncertainty for the next few years on the Space Coast, his long-term goal is clear.
Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit. And by 2025, we expect new spacecraft designed for long journeys to allow us to begin the first ever crewed missions beyond the moon into deep space. We'll start by sending astronauts to an asteroid for the first time in history. By the mid-2030s, I believe we can send humans to orbit Mars and return them safely to Earth. And a landing on Mars will follow, and I expect to be around to see it.
The President's message was definitely more of a long-term message, and of course with space, I mean, you can't just build and do things and launch tomorrow. So I think the message was that it wasn't a long-term solution. I mean, we're already, as a country and as a local area, we're hurting from the economy, and the loss of the space shuttle program at the same time of that, losing 7,000 jobs, the closing of the Constellation program, and the 2,000 jobs that were supposed to go with that. And then we're going to be losing potentially with those jobs three regular jobs that weren't even, directly on the, the NASA compound. That in the area we lose 3 for every 1 that we had there. So I mean, and even then, the transition is going to take some time. So, I mean, while there'll be some jobs gained in construction, again, those aren't long-term jobs. So that's my concern, and obviously the jobs, bring the money that drive the economy, especially here locally. And so we're just concerned in, say, within the next 5 years, we could, in this area, go into a higher unemployment rate and more of a deeper depression, both from the value of properties and businesses closing that are, that thrive on the dollars earned.
Whether or not workers who get laid off from the shuttle program can find work or hold out until new jobs present themselves in the coming years is yet to be seen. But for now, unless Congress decides to abolish the Obama plan, the course is set for the future of the space program on the Space Coast.
Now, 50 years after the creation of NASA, our goal is no longer just a destination to reach. Our goal is the capacity for people to work and learn and operate and live safely beyond the Earth for extended periods of time, ultimately in ways that are more sustainable and even indefinite. And in fulfilling this task, we will not only extend humanity's reach in space, we will strengthen America's leadership here on Earth.